Welcome to another episode of Pistons of Fury. In this episode, we're making some custom transmission cooler lines to connect our 4L80E to our transmission cooler up in the front of our 1966 Dodge Coronet Turbo LS Mopar swap. Okay, so now that I have the oil cooler lines all run, I'm shifting over to the other side of the car and we're going to tackle the transmission lines. Now what I'm going to do here, instead of running full custom lines all the way from the transmission to the cooler itself, what we're going to do is chop the stock lines right here before they hit this bend, and we're going to adjust, well, not adjust, but we're just going to adapt some standard 3/8 inch hose to go to our cooler, and we'll do some fitting conversions there. But this will be the easiest thing. I've already got some mounts and stuff from the stock setup, so this should hopefully, with a little bit of bending, fit pretty well and be a low-cost alternative to running full A and everything like I did on the oil side. Okay, update on the progress so far. So, got these two guys in here, mostly hand tight, but flush against the transmission. And what I ended up doing was, if you kind of see through there, ended up shortening the lines a lot more than I thought I would, just so I didn't have to deal with the cross member. They were just interfering with a lot of stuff, and decided that my most optimal route was kind of hugging the transmission real closely here through the tunnel, and then shooting out to the frame rail. So I have them cut kind of short, and it was just a series of trial and error rebending those. Didn't use a bender or anything. I like to use the vise when I do lines like this, just to either flatten out curves or make new curves. If you're careful, you can do it without kinking. Yeah, so we've got 3/8 lines going to the frame rail. So what I'm going to do now is pull these out, and we're going to double flare the ends to create a nice seal for the hose that will eventually slip onto them and clamp on. So let's bust out the flaring tool. Okay, so here's where we are. We have our lines with flares now on the end. Now these aren't, I wouldn't call these safe to put in a braking system, but since the purpose of these is really just to give the hose something to grab onto when we put the rubber hose over this and clamp it, they will suffice for this purpose. So you probably saw I had to modify my my flaring tool because it just wasn't up to the task. So that was fun. It's always good to make your own tools. So next up, I've got these plastic clips. I have another one of these somewhere into the car. It fell off. But basically these are going to keep the lines spaced neatly apart while they're in place. And then we will use some P-clamps to mount the rubber hoses that connected this to the frame rail. And then the rubber hoses will basically go up to the front to the cooler, which we did in the last episode, or 2 episodes ago. And we'll have some AN fittings that convert to these 3/8" lines. And once those are in place, then our transmission cooling system is done, so that's pretty exciting. Just kind of checking things off. So next up, I need to get the appropriate hose for this, clamps, and then the AN fittings, and then we can wrap this up. Okay, so the next part of what we're doing is we have our lines all cut to size, routed where we want them to go, and we have kind of double flares on the end of those that'll make sure that when we put our hose on, we can clamp that in place and there should be no leaks of transmission fluid, so that's all good. What I have here is a 25-foot roll of 3/8 fuel line, so that's CTFE compliant, I guess, which means it's a special type of rubber that won't harden as it gets older. If you use standard like heater hose or standard rubber hose that isn't meant for fuels or different kinds of chemicals, then it will actually harden and you'll eventually get leaks. So I'm using the fuel line. It was actually cheaper to buy this 25-foot roll than it was to buy smaller lengths, if you believe that or not. So this is from Summit. Should take care of everything I need to do for this cooler setup and also for some other random vacuum and cooling lines through the car. So gonna get started, gonna put these back in and we'll get some hose cut to length, and I'll show you once we get up to the cooler a couple new pieces that I got to connect this whole thing together. Alright, so the last key to this puzzle is these -10 AN to 3/8" hose barb adapters. So these are female, so they screw right onto the male outlets of my cooler, and basically the hose just goes in there and you clamp it tight. So, pretty simple.